time once again for Community Forum, and we're very lucky to have back with us live here in the studios this morning, Reverend Bill Kirlin-Hackett. Reverend Bill Kirlin-Hackett is the director of the Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness, and we're going to be talking about homelessness here in Seattle and King County this morning. Bill, thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us again this morning.
Thanks for the invitation. Good to be with you.
So start out, for those that are not familiar, what is the Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness?
We started in 2001 under the direction of Reverend David Bloom, my predecessor, and there was an event at St. Mark's Cathedral that Dean Taylor started, who was the staff there at the time, because of Tent City 3 being hosted on site. And he asked, what are we doing around homelessness? So 350 people came, and what they did was, the first thing they did was form our task force. And the second thing they did was say, let's have a conversation about a plan, and they started the conversation around the 10-year plan, both out of the same event. So we've been working since 2001 on education advocacy, and since maybe the last 8 or 9 years on direct service. And a good share of the direct service we've done has been around people living in vehicles. So we are low profile, low organizational style, fluid and dynamic, and respond quickly and try to help people partner. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do. And sometimes we cause trouble, and sometimes we, work with people to create new ways of thinking. And I'll talk a little bit about boxes later, because people are stuck in boxes in this system.
So speaking of causing a little trouble, September of 2015, just a little over a year ago, you had publicly started challenging Mayor Ed Murray on declaring a state of emergency for the homeless. And just a month or so after that began, he did exactly that. So I was hoping you could, and you were on the show just briefly after that, and so I was hoping you can kind of give us an update. Where are we since that state of emergency has been declared?
Sure. I was not the only one who was frustrated with the lack of cohesive responses and recognizing what we thought was an emergency. So I took to Facebook and found out that if I put Mayor Ed Murray in, it would be on his timeline. And I started a series of 12, I guess I call them exhortations or epistles, messages to him aimed at the emergency and encouraging that he recognize it one way or another. I truly can't recall if I used the word state of emergency. I must have. I have the text at home. I should reread it. But nevertheless, in early November, which was several weeks after I stopped, he and Executive Constantine did declare states of emergency, which a lot of us in the community hearkened as a step forward. We thought it would break down barriers. It would get us into a way of thinking that we hadn't been using. And I actually brought some show and tell, which won't work for the radio, but Mike does record this, so maybe it'll show up somewhere. But it started with how we all think in the box, and that's how our systems usually work. And we try to keep to the confines of the box with our outcomes and our nonprofits and our providers and our spending. Then we say we have to be outside the box, and so there's the homeless person outside the box, but the box still exists, and we make more focus on the box than we do the people still. So I heard Thomas Friedman recently, and he said we have to throw away the box. So that means, for me, when you declare a state of emergency, you stop worrying about the boxes and you focus on the people, just the people. And the boxes become ancillary or helpful to the people. Instead, we're still stuck in the box. We're systemic people. We want to support the systems that we've had. And so we end up with lots of siloed behavior, lack of partnership. In fact, when Focus Strategies came and did the report for All Home, adjacent to the Barbara Poppy report for the city, their main point was we've got multiple systems operating instead of one system. And everybody shook their head and said, yeah, that doesn't work. And she said, yeah, but that's you. That's how you're doing it. So we're trying to work our way out of that, but it's entrenched behavior. It's like Sam Keen, a favorite mentor, said, the sign on the muddy road says, choose your rut carefully. You'll be in it the next 10 miles. We love the ruts we've been in. So the only way out of these ruts is to do away with the box. Maybe in that case it would be do away with the road. I don't know how that works, but the main thing I know is that when we focus more on the people and look at it from the bottom up, and systems always look at it from the top down, when we look at it from the bottom up, we begin to see what's needed. And there's too little of that right now. We're not really looking at it through the eyes of the people going through this. We don't tend to listen to them. We still call them consumers. If we call them consumers, does that make us sellers? Or what does that make us? I still can't get that word changed. We still call the homeless who are in the system consumers. So if you try to follow that capitalist model someplace, it takes you to oblivion. And it takes you to confusion, and it takes you to boxes. So we're still trying to shake that way of thinking even. That's why it's good that we're not in a box getting public money and kind of stuck doing reports and outcomes and projected outcomes. Sometimes these are needed, but we will not end homelessness that way, and we're proving it. So whatever you asked me, I got that far.
So that seems to be a common critique of the city's response on doing its two studies that it did, that it didn't even incorporate in talking to any of the people who are actually out there living on the streets.
Well, they interviewed people, and I think Focus probably did a better job of that. Barbara Poppy might have interviewed people, but at the same time, she came at this with more of a framework that she wanted to apply. She actually quoted the Focus strategies enormously in her report. So it's not that they didn't tell us anything that we don't know or can't use, but we've already turned away from some of the things that Poppy was recommending, which tended to take us away from housing tonight, which is the word we've coined for how do you get people into a safe place tonight. That's the first step out of homelessness, is to get out of harm reduction, harm alleviation. She wanted us to really just try to get people straight into housing first, which would be marvelous if we had a housing stock that we could put people into, but we don't. And so you need interim ways of doing that. We called them interim survival mechanisms in the 10-year plan. And those are everything from tent cities to small houses to shelters in congregations to safe parking, all kinds of other remedies that take people out of the harm that they face every day and begin to give them a chance to use their energy toward their own capacity to be out of homelessness. And we know most people have that. Some have recovery needs, and so we need a pathway for them that's different, and they need to be walked through that because you don't do this alone, especially recovery. But even those who have capacity need people with them to exit homelessness. We've learned that the hard way, and we still think that you can just give a key to somebody and walk away and they'll be fine in an apartment. It doesn't work. Even Sam Sumberis from Pathways to Housing back in New York, when they started Housing First, they realized that they're losing their old community when they get that key, and sometimes that old community drags them back in and away from their stability. So we know that a lot of what we know we're not incorporating because we keep using that same rut or those same system tools or the same organizations that maybe aren't changing fast enough. And they're still valuable organizations, but they're not the ones that we should be making the pioneers because we're not thinking without the box, you see. So we just keep, Seattle puts, $58 million in, we hear. And the consultant said, wow, you should not be having this problem with that much money. And that's only part of the money. We get HUD money too, some 25, 30 million. Could be more than that now. Don't quote me, anybody. But nevertheless, that's a lot of funding, and we're not seeing the results that we ought to be seeing. And we're seeing too many people who still turn back from pathways. Too many people still having to wait. Even the coordinated entry, I've described it kind of like a hovercraft because the system, again, built out from the top. It comes down to the ground and it hovers over the ground. It spreads out like an umbrella, spreads over the ground, but it never reaches the ground for everybody because you have to go somewhere to be assessed and you have to go somewhere to be referred. And they're trying to get outreach workers. That's why, especially with vehicles, we're talking about this. People in vehicles are not going to go to a regional access point and get assessed so they can be put into the homeless management information system and wait for housing. People whose urgency every day is food, safety, shelter, are not going to go, oh, look I have my calendar up in my car and it says in 4 weeks I'll have an interview. I mean, come on. That's how we live in our houses. We mark the calendar in the kitchen wall. But that's not how folks on the street live. So that's what I mean. We don't have a frame of mind that actually incorporates into what we're trying to do what people are going through. And so a lot of that's around harm reduction too. I mean, that's why the vehicle thing is so important for us. Every day we have the same rules in place, and the very good public safety officers are out there just enforcing the rules we gave them. So I can't even fault them. I mean, every now and then there's a few who maybe behave a little oddly and have a bad day and give out a ticket they shouldn't have given out. But for the most part, we've given them the wrong tools to do the job.
So talk more about that. You do a lot of your focus specifically on people living in vehicles. Paint us a picture. How many people are out living in a vehicle on any given night?
So this year, the annual count, the point-in-time count, was different. So we won't have those numbers until May. But it's always been about a third of the total number we count. So last year, that number was in the around 17, 18, 1900. I don't have those figures in front of me, but we know that out of the 4,500, it was about a third of those unsheltered. And the problem we continue to have is that we've got, I'll just talk for King County, we've got 39 cities with 39 different ways that they respond to people living in vehicles. And in Seattle, we've done some reports where it shows, and you may not be able to see this, but we've got no parking 2 to 5 a.m. signs up in many places around the city. I think that's a better map that shows how many we've got. And the only reason those are there is to keep people who would put their vehicle there overnight from sleeping in it. It's not about storage of vehicles, although it could be a little bit including that, but mainly it's not about that. And then the other thing that we've got going because of that is we've got people who don't have current tabs, and it's hard to have current tabs when you're living in a vehicle because you don't have the money. But the leading cause, this is from the court, the leading cause of harm to people living in vehicles with tickets is tabs. And it's the gateway to everything else. You can't renew your license, you can't put title down, and then they can give you one every day. In fact, one guy called me this week, and he had been down to the court because he tried to renew his tabs, and the licensing office said, oh, you've got tickets, you have to go take care of those. So he went down to the court. The people we're working with, and they've been really great to work with, by the way, because they were part of a protocol that came up under Mayor McGinn to work with us. And so this is the scofflaw mitigation program that I do with Jane Darcy. So he went down to the court. They said, you don't have any tickets. They should be giving you your tabs, and he was going to pay for them and stuff. So he went back, and they still wouldn't give it to him. But in the time it took him to do that, he got 2 tickets within 1 minute of each other for not having current tabs. So in other words, 2 parking enforcement or patrol, probably parking enforcement people came by and said his tabs aren't current, put more tickets on. So I told him you have to actually go back to the court, and maybe the court can actually send the licensing office, once he takes care of those other 2, some kind of information that you're clear of tickets. But the problem is he could have tickets in another jurisdiction, meaning out of state or some other place that he hasn't known about, and that now that he's trying to renew the tabs are interfering. So that's how convoluted this is for a person living in their vehicle. He may not be able to renew his tabs without going to another state, or who knows. So that's the licensing office. That's where you have to go, and you wait 2 or 3 hours to talk to someone and find out what's blocking me from. They're the only ones who know that. So I talk about silos. This is a messy, siloed system for people living in vehicles just to stay safe. And the only way he could get out of that is if he parked off the street at a faith community or somewhere like that. So otherwise, every time he's on the street, he's subject to more tickets because his tabs aren't current. And the only thing that we've worked out with the city, parking enforcement, and the court is that when we're doing outreach and we get emails from them when they find a candidate for scofflaw, which is 4 or more tickets, they send us an email about doing outreach. We go out. While we're doing that, in this electronic system they have, harm is suspended. In other words, they shouldn't get any more tickets or be responsible for any more while we're doing outreach, which I'll do with this guy. I'll say, hey, we're trying to conduct outreach with him, and you're still giving him tickets. So they may tear those up. We'll see. But the point is, the system is still so messed up that if he's got out-of-state tickets or something else, we can't fix it. And that's what I'm talking about, the kind of harm that keeps happening to people. I've got dozens of stories about different ways that people get harmed through the laws, and scofflaw law had no provision in it in Seattle for the indigent, people living in vehicles. We've tried since 2011 when they passed it to get the ordinance changed. Council has, oh, this is perfect. I have a children's toy here. Council has been on the stump. You know, they get elected, they run for office. They've got big issues. They're really good with some, like immigration right now. You know, I love some of this stuff that they're on the stump about. But the problem is when it comes to vehicle residency, and this includes all the mayors and all the councils in the whole county, that's what the stump looks like. We can't find them. They aren't passing policies to help. They aren't doing anything to bridge the gap. And the name of the interim homeless response from the mayor is Bridging the Gap. They're not doing anything to bridge the gap. So we've met with the director of homelessness, George Scarola, that the mayor appointed, and George is really listening well, and he's truly bothered by this lack of response around vehicles. So we don't know where it's going yet. He's been involved in these other interim things the city's doing, the 3 new encampments, the navigation center. These in themselves are good things. They're still not anywhere near enough. They're like little episodic transactional efforts. They're like putting Band-Aids on a wound when your whole leg is on fire. You know, it helps a little, but it's not gonna. But so when George heard about the reality of what's going on with vehicles and there's no policy, he wants to be part of that. But we don't hear anything else from the city. I mean, they talk about a study group, a work group. The council doesn't want to change the law. As long as the law works against the poor, and this is across the board on all issues, but as long as the law works against the poor, it will still harm the poor. You know, and that's what we're battling. In some cases, we're like fingers in the dike all over the place. At the same time, we're trying to walk with them to court and help the court behave well, which it has done. You know, I praise the Seattle Municipal Court. They've done great jobs. And for the most part, parking enforcement has done a great job with this. But we're bridging a gap between those responses in the city where the city isn't owning up to what it should be doing between the gaps. You know, we're doing it for no pay from the city. And even George Scarola understands that. And the mayor won't meet with it. I don't think he has an idea about a policy around this. He's never talked to us about it. We can't seem to get a meeting with the mayor to talk about it. But this is also true in every other city in King County. So we're taking it to the state, you know, in a way for maybe legislation next session around tabs, but having them be complementary. And there's ways to do that because the revised Code of Washington allows indigency to have responses that help remove the harm from their indigency, and tabs is the biggest one. And this would include even low-income housed persons who can't get their tabs current and need to go to medical appointments or other things like that. So we've got groups like Disability Rights Washington and others kind of signing on to. So we're going after the number one harm vehicle, to use a bad pun, that's being used to keep people, and it keeps people in poverty, and it keeps them always moving around every 72 hours, or in Bellevue every 24 hours. I mean, I think they're the best managers in the world to stay out of harm's way. We probably should hire them because that's how, you know, the ones that we don't hear about are the ones who've managed to follow all these rules and stay out of chaos, all the while still trying to survive. So, I mean, the more we talk about or get in contact with people going through these stories, 3 weeks ago, we had a family of 9 living in an Explorer, and the Explorer got towed. You know, and then it was right around the same time as the Count Us In. And through a combination of neighbor care in Columbia City, Mary's Place, thanks to colleague Joe Martin at Pike Place, ABC Towing in Tukwila released that car. You know, that's never happened. So just because we did some legwork, that family has stabilized, but a family of 9 living in an Explorer, you know, and that's the kind of craziness we're seeing. And it makes me sometimes want to go down and not just protest, but, you know, just start knocking things down somewhere because it's that hard to bear, the suffering we're seeing. And that's why I struggle, you know, when the politicians are still inside the stump hiding, and they go out and they have a big fanfare about how they're looking at something, and then they come back and they don't do anything. I mean, I was at the opening of the housing Ronald Commons yesterday, 60 new units in Shoreline for $20 million. So I figured that's over $300,000 a unit for 60 units. And I thought, okay, this is a nice way to try to end homelessness. And I really do appreciate the fact that this is going to be a beautiful place for these folks, and the food bank's in the bottom, and I appreciated all that. But that is not the way to end homelessness, because we can't keep doing it that way. We're not going to dedicate $30 million or $20 million per project or more. I've heard variations of $250 million a unit to $500 million, $500 million a unit for what happened at Sandpoint. So, I mean, we just can't end homelessness that way. So we need these true interim mechanisms, whether they're more tent cities, safe parking sites, and then engagement at each level to help people start to exit. Here's the pathway. We'll walk with you. We're just not doing that well right now. And it's very frustrating.
Well, it seems in the newspapers, both locally and nationally, the tiny houses concept is being touted as a reasonable stepping stone for a lot of things. But vehicles seem like, they're kind of tiny houses. I mean, not as nice, obviously.
Really tiny.
Super tiny, and obviously you can't sleep normally in most of them. However, they already do exist, so why wouldn't the city, ease up on that issue itself?
Well,
and didn't the city?
They did try. They had
for RVs.
They had 3 interim sites. One was a more formal site, and 2 were just safe spots off the street. But they were all interim. The only one that in any form still survives is down in Soto near the bridge, Spokane Bridge, and it's I'd say a disaster for the people there. It's just not near anything. It's not a pleasant place to be. And they sort of gave it up. Yankee Diner, they overspent on things they should never have spent money on. And then the project had a time limit because the land was only available for 9 months or so. So it's like the bridging the gap is, let's try bad interim solutions gap plan. And the mayor has said he's, at one point, when I think it may have been more around the jungle, that we're making a lot of this up as we go along. The problem with that is he's really not taking advice from people who work with people on the streets. He's taking advice from people who sit in the 7th floor or 6th floor or 5th floor in City Hall, many of whom never have worked with folks on the streets, who are maybe thinking politically about his reelection, some of whom are thinking about his image, some of whom maybe just don't want to lose the job for bringing up an idea that may offend him. All the various things that are going on, some who have ideas they're afraid to say. Whatever it is, I always come back to, and I know we're getting near the end here, I always come back to this is a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue. And we're not being led well anywhere, really. In King County. I also work in Snohomish County, and I'm a part of the Homeless Policy Task Force up there, and we just met with their continuum of care group called the Partnership To End Homelessness. And what we said to them is they're the ones responsible for the spending of the money and the big ideas, and the Homeless Policy Task Force is the long-term group that used to do that. We said, we are not working together. There's a gap between us that we need to close because people in this county don't even know there's a Partnership To End Homelessness. And it's not different than it is here. I showed them materials from All Home, and we have impressive materials through All Home's strategic plan. allhomekc.org, go look at them. But a lot of people I meet out in King County don't know we have a strategic plan even. That we're all trying to partner, that the average citizen is valuable in this, that every organization, faith community is valuable to this, that you can all begin to do something around this. We're struggling with that because, again, it's that same hovercraft mentality. It hasn't reached not only the homeless on the ground, it hasn't reached enough of the citizens on the ground who can create assets. We're meeting with some folks who were connected to us from kind of a group that isn't always favored of the liberals, Smart Growth Seattle, which is kind of developers. And what they're putting us together with are people who are building small houses, have other options for small houses that actually collapse and don't have to be carted away on a flatbed. We had a small house group 2 or 3 years ago. We're starting another one with new ideas that are where there's no box. How can we actually make some of this happen faster? And small houses, some of the more sophisticated ones will cost more than $2,200 that the volunteer ones that they're putting together now are. but that's still less than $300,000 a unit. And some of them, the ones I've seen last 5 or 10 years, if people begin to stabilize from survival needs, they can begin to get a job, get income, move up their own ladder of stability into a place they might afford. It might not be in Seattle, but somewhere. But right now, we are not at that level below the hovering system. We're not helping people take those first steps. And that's just, it's as simple as that. It sounds crazy to believe that it's that simple, but it is that simple. We're not helping the people on the ground from their point of view.
So just about 4 minutes left. So yeah, $58 million seems like we should be able to solve the problem. $58 million per year seems like we should be able to solve this problem. So if you were put in charge, if Murray just put you in charge and cut you loose,
that would be a cold day in hell.
Yeah,
said by this
stranger things have
person,
happened,
right? No, not that strange. Well, I think it's a matter of first looking at things regionally. Even in Seattle, we work regionally. We've got U District, Ballard, West Seattle groups going, and there's others. In King County, we've got the East Side Homeless Advisory. They're starting another one on the north end, South County. We're starting an all-home vehicle residency work group, and our main goal is to do the same thing, to work regionally, find regional solutions, but solutions that begin with what's going on for the people there, not what are the assets we can bring to this, and then let's just spread them over it. That's the opposite of putting a seed in the ground and letting it grow from the bottom up. This is like kind of creating something from the top, and I'm not sure what the garden illusion would be there, but that's how we continue to think. What resources can we bring to bear on this? Instead of realizing, well, let's look at what the people need and then develop those pathways for them into those resources. We don't do it that way, and so more outreach is needed, more listening to people who are consumers. That it's an ugly word. More partnering among those who can help them, more walking with them, the Craig Rennebaum model that Kay Eaton now does out of the Seattle Mental Health Chaplaincy of accompaniment, companionship, almost like a mentor. If you're the homeless person, I stick with you. I walk with you till you're stabilizing. Maybe we stay in touch and we become friends down the road, or we don't. But we don't have this system working like that. And we've got plenty of people out there willing to help at some level who don't know how to help, because the hovercraft is not reaching them either. I mean, in my faith community, same thing. There have been 60 people or more trained in companionship who hardly are being used anywhere right now because they don't know where to plug in. So I just think, if I was going to talk to the mayor, I'd just say, sit on your head or do something to see that you've got it 3-letter word backwards.
We're talking with the Reverend Bill Kirlin-Hackett with the Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness. How can people find out more about your organization and the work you do?
Well, we have a webpage that I don't keep very current. It's itfhomeless.org. But they can email me straight, itfh@comcast.net. They can call me. I mean, everybody on the street has my number. It's on the flyers parking enforcement gives out, 425-442-5418. We are hosted out of St. Luke's Lutheran in Bellevue at 3030 Bellevue Way, Bellevue 98004. So that's how we're able to do this. We always need funds. We always need more people interested in coming to our meetings, which currently are the second Wednesday of the month, noon to 1:30 at University Congregational at 45th and 16th. People are always welcome. We don't have members. We have activists, people who want to do things. So help. We need help is what we need. And not just our task force, the system. We need help.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you for coming in and spending time with us again this morning.
I hope people will watch the video so they can see the puppet.
Okay. We'll be posting that online. So, all right. Thanks again.